Okay, with that, we are streaming live now on YouTube. So I want to welcome everybody to our special meeting of Town Council for June 15th, 2020. I'd like to move right into item 1, call the meeting to order, and then on to item 2, of course, approval of the agenda. The recommendation tonight is that the agenda for the special council meeting of June 15th, 2020 be approved as presented. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Ostrander. Any discussion on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thanks, everyone. Motion is carried. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any declarations from members of council this evening? Seeing none. So item 4, just moving right along, is minutes of the previous council meeting. And under 4.1, the meeting minutes from the special meeting of June 1st, 2020. The recommendation there is that the special council meeting minutes of June 1st, 2020 be accepted as presented. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Young, seconded by Councillor Shankar. Any discussion on that set of minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks, everyone. So on to item 5, communications and petitions. 5.1 is action items, nothing under that item on the agenda this evening. 5.2, information items distributed under separate cover. The recommendation tonight, as always, is that the information items under separate cover be received and filed. If I could have a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Jansman, seconded by Councillor Ostrander. So open it up for discussion. Did anyone want to comment on any of the information items tonight, or refer them on to a future council meeting? Okay, all good. So I'll move to the proceed to call the question then. All in favor? Motion carried. Thanks very much, everyone. So on to item 6, and 6.1 to staff report 41-2020. And that's over to our CAO, Mr. Armstrong, for the update on the COVID-19 actions for this meeting. Take it away, Matt.
Thank you very much. So since our last meeting, there's been a few substantial changes for the province of Ontario. And one obviously being, regardless of where you live in Ontario, social gatherings can now be up to 10 people with maintaining physical distance. There was also some information on Friday, released late on Friday, around social bubbles. And so certainly we want to understand that a little bit more, but we will bring that back to council as well. Places of worship will now be allowed to reopen with a limit of 30% building capacity and requiring physical distancing. Working remotely is still encouraged as much as possible. And then there was a whole plethora of stage 2 businesses that are now allowed to open under specific health and safety guidelines. In terms of the federal government, they also announced last week a change for foreign nationals that are immediate family members of Canadian citizens or permanent residents, that they're now able to enter Canada, have to stay at least 15 days, and must quarantine for 14 days. So certainly that was just a couple of changes. In terms of things that have changed in the town of Prescott in the last couple of weeks following those announcements, the Kiwanis Skateboard Park is now open and can be used, again, using social distancing as well as, or physical distancing, as well as a limit to the number of people that can use it at any one time. And at this point, we're not encouraging traffic use in that area, so it's still maintaining kind of the parking lot to be off limits, but we don't see that as being an impediment because many of the skateboarders actually skateboard down to the park and then participate in that. Benches, as per the last meeting, there was a request from council to take a look at benches and see if they could be made available. And so that was reviewed, and certainly that is now available for people to use. Picnic tables, starting, I believe, on Friday, they can now be used. Again, physical distancing, 1 household per table, because it would be very difficult to physically distance at a picnic table and try and create that 6-foot barrier. Kelly's Beach to open tomorrow. Again, physical distancing will be key, and we will be adding signage very similar to the community signs that are around town to just reinforce those messages. Centennial Pool, so this was the large amount of discussion around this one. And when we took a look at the health and safety requirements to open that, both from a changing room perspective and a bathroom perspective, they're very onerous. Still limiting to a certain number of people or a limited number of people in the area at any one time. You would have to do it by appointment only. Things like complete terminal clean of both the washrooms and change rooms, the availability of lifeguard staffing. And obviously we had a lengthy discussion with the health unit as well, and then the health risks to staff and users. On top of that, kind of as a secondary point, it would be a high cost to operate it for limited use in terms of hydrochemicals, natural gas, and that sort of thing. So through much discussion, we also took a look at surrounding municipalities. And as I believe as of this afternoon, Edwardsburg Cardinal also made the decision to keep theirs closed for the summer season. South Stormont has made that decision. The Y isn't looking at opening until the fall. And so that was kind of the basis of that conversation. Gazebos and outdoor covered spaces open as of tomorrow. Again, physical distancing and not doing rentals at this time. Just to make sure that we're not encouraging large groups to gather together. Dive ramps. So we're working with Brockville, Augusta, and Edwardsburg Cardinal to coordinate a common set of guidelines, signage, and opening date. The opening date will be determined once all 4 municipalities are comfortable with moving forward. There was some back and forth today around just disinfecting and protocols and things like that when it comes for divers coming in and out of the water. And so certainly wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page on that one. Centennial Splash Pad remains under construction. We're looking at probably completion around the end of July. And so it'll be exciting once the building's up and make the connections to the utilities. And then we'll take a look at it at that point to say, can we open and do that safely? So many municipalities are still weighing the options when it comes to splash pads, whether to open or not. And by giving us not that we can open now anyways, just because we're still in construction, but once we near the end of construction, we'll have a better understanding of what other municipalities are doing, and that will help inform the decision. Another question that came up, and we did discuss it on Friday as part of the emergency control group, is patios and where we would have some say from a town perspective, and then where the health unit would have kind of ultimate authority. So how we broke it down was, if it's going to not be on town property, so it's not going to be on the sidewalk, maybe it's in a parking lot, things like that, certainly the health unit has the primary authority in that case. When it's going to be on the sidewalk, then it becomes a town issue as well as the health unit. And so certainly we would go through an application process, make sure that we can distance people, make sure that the barriers are appropriate. If we're coming out into the roadway and perhaps blocking off spaces and things like that, then making sure that we're maintaining the accessibility standards instead of in terms of coming on and off of the sidewalk. And so I just wanted to give council an update on that. An email was sent to all of our eateries and restaurants to that effect. And we have worked with Bobby's just on Friday and the weekend they wanted to just put out a table and a couple of chairs just as a waiting area. And so we reviewed that. No separation was required in that case because we're not doing it from an eatery perspective. No beverages or food are to be enjoyed there, and so that became a much easier discussion. And I did confirm with Dana this afternoon that we haven't had any other requests for patios at this time from the businesses that we're communicated with. So that's in a nutshell the update for today, and more than happy to go through any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. Yeah, it was a really it's a good meeting, and I really want to thank everyone on that emergency control group for the great partnership all along with the health unit, OPP staff. Everyone that's been on there has done an excellent job. It was noted a couple of times at the end of the meeting, and I had a nice conversation with our new Grenville County OPP inspector, Nancy Graves, about that. she's found it very, very good working with us as well. So it's nice that crises like this always test you, and I think we're coming through and we're passing the test, which was actually nice to see. Although of course there are some difficult decisions that have been made, and it's been a tough one at times, but I think we've made them in safe and sensible ways, and we're trying to move forward as best we can. So with that, I'll open it up for comments, questions from members of council on that COVID-19 action report. Councillor Jansman.
Just a note, Matthew, for your information, in case you need to have it. There has been some scuba divers already active just east of the marina. They park in our and walk their equipment down. Just FYI.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jansman. Other comments, questions? Councillor Burton, please.
Thank you. Regarding the pool, Matthew, are we adding chemicals in there to make sure that the water is not sitting there stagnant and creating more of a hazard than anything?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question through you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, it's scheduled for complete cleaning. I believe this week. We're just waiting on, we had 8.5 gallons of the acid that we used to clean it, and we need 10 in order to be able to. So we're just waiting on that last gallon and a half. As soon as that comes in, the complete pool will be cleaned, and then we'll make sure that there's no standing water causing any issues.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Councillor McConnell.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. In my travels, I find that people are very happy about us opening up the benches to be able to sit on. I find that people are not happy about the pool not opening, but given the explanation that came forth, I think I agree with the decision there. The other comments that I've heard have been around the washrooms at the marina, and people are a little upset that they are not available to the public. And quite frankly, I think if possible, we need to take another look at that. I'm given to understand that if you have a boat in the marina, you can buy a fob, the same as the ones that we have, that let you access the building after hours when there's no staff there. And of course, if there's no staff there, there's no guarantee that it's being sanitized or there's any proper distancing going on. And in the daytime, when there is staff there to do sanitizing and ensure proper distancing, it seems to me that we should be able to let our people use it as a public washroom. I read with interest the same debate that was had in Brockville with Brockville Council in regards to the washrooms at Hardy Park. And it was, some people on one side, some people on the other, but they finally decided not to open them because they would have had to station somebody there full time to do sanitizing. In our particular case at the marina, when it's open till 8 o'clock at night, we do have the staff there to do the sanitizing. Since we're not opening the pool, we don't have anybody up there, so it wouldn't be reasonable to open those washrooms in Stennial Park. Even though we're going to have the beach open, that's going to be unfortunate. But I would like staff to take a look at if we can legally do it with provincial legislation, opening up the washrooms at the marina for public use. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor McConnell. Mr. Armstrong, any comment on that? That is, I think that's going to be the theme of the summer around pretty much everywhere, because people are traveling a little more now, and the lack of public washrooms all over is proving to be a bit of an issue. So any comment on that and what the rationale has been so far for that with the washrooms, and is there a way we could perhaps get towards more of a public opening there? Because we really don't have anything. It's always been an issue downtown, even with the marina there, that we haven't had enough washrooms downtown, and with none at all right now. It's a very valid point of concern.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So through you, certainly it was a very large portion of our decision making around what to do with those washrooms. And the initial thought was to separate boaters and the general public as much as possible, then trying to limit it in that way would make sense. So in terms of, that being said, we do have signage up that says for boaters user only, but we have been allowing people that in case of emergency or that sort of thing to use it. And so we have been tracking that the last 2 weeks. And last week there were 72 bathroom usages by boaters, 14 by residents. So so certainly one of the things that we also work with our boaters is offer them free pump out service for this year to encourage them to use their onboard activity or onboard facilities. And that's met with a lot of appreciation and understanding that that certainly helps us reducing the amount of the times that we need to address the washroom. So certainly I'm more than happy to take this back to the control group and see how we could possibly do it in a reasonable and controlled way. And if it's possible, then certainly we'll make every effort to try and do it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. Anything further, Councillor McConnell?
No, I asked, he offered. More than that, we just have to wait. Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. Thank
you, Councillor McConnell. Any other comments, questions on that report this evening? Councillor Shankar.
I had asked previously of Dana and of Matthew about the availability of having patios for some of the restaurants downtown and uptown. I haven't even talked to the owner of Tim Hortons, but we're going to make it as easy as possible from the town's point of view, is my understanding. We're going to make it as easy as possible for them to provide some sort of business to the residents of Prescott. Is that correct, Matthew? Through you, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll let Matt address the rest of that. But that's been the focus, is to try to help them get back on their feet as quickly as possible.
I know that, sorry, Matthew. I know that Dana has sent out an email, but I don't know if we need to follow that up, or do we need to, I don't want to run the business for them, but, here we are sending them the email saying we're willing to help. We want to help. We want to see them succeed. I think restaurants are one of the hardest hit industries of this whole pandemic. So the more we can do, the better, is just what we want to convey that message.
Absolutely. And so to that end, Dana also found a great vendor that actually rents sidewalk patios with all the necessary barriers and things like that. So really that's our primary concern, is making sure that everyone enjoying the restaurant, the outdoor area, as well as the pedestrians are safe. And so we'll make every effort to work with all of our restaurants, and certainly we'll reach out again this week just to show some examples of what they could look like, while at the same time understanding that it might not be feasible for some, that they wish to go in a different direction. So.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for that comment, Councillor Shankar. I want to thank staff again for doing such great work on that as well. There was a request that came in through me actually about Bobby's at the end of last week, and I know staff even dealt with that on the weekend to try to help Bob out with doing what Matt had just mentioned. So I think staff's really been going all out to try to help our businesses there. So yeah, it's a great point to make. Anything further on the COVID report? Just the one final comment on the pool situation as well. Obviously, it was a tough decision, but I understand Edwardsburg Cardinal came to the same conclusion at their committee meeting earlier this afternoon. So it does look like the municipal public pools for this summer will be shut down, which is sad, but it's just a very difficult thing for any of us to actually make happen right now. We're very fortunate we have the beach, and obviously the staff is working on a plan there for access to the water, and also to ensure that people are set up properly with social distancing. There's going to be a need for people to use the grass more. Not everyone's going to be able to get onto the sandy area all the time. So it will look a little different down there, but staff is working at that to make it as amenable as possible and as welcoming as possible while respecting the situation we're unfortunately in this summer. Councilor McConnell?
It seems to me that when we were discussing hiring staff for the Marina, now correct me if I'm wrong here, I thought I remember Matthew saying that we were going to hire the pool staff for the Marina. In case we were able to open the pool, we could switch them over. Did we do that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we did that. And so 3 out of the 4 that we provided conditional letters of offer to did accept, and they're filling positions at the Marina as well as in our operations group. So we have been able to provide the maximum number of positions to those that are returning. And then just today we hired another 3 individuals for the Marina to fill out the complement for the Marina now that we've dealt with all of our returning students.
That being the case, if I may, Mayor Todd, is there any thought given to providing lifeguard services at Kelly's Beach, since we are going to be opening the pool?
So we did explore that. There are 2 separate certifications, and I'm not aware that we have enough individuals with the separate certification for beaches to be able to provide that service.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember we actually put some of the lifeguards, Councilor Burton will remember that. We did put the lifeguard crew through that a few years ago, and then we ran into the issue with some Coast Guard regulations and so on. We weren't able to open the beach. So that is something to be nice to get back to at some point. I think it's with the amount of users at the beach, but that is a little more challenging because it is a completely separate program they have to qualify for the open water. So excellent point though, Councilor McConnell. But as we'll see how things go at the beach, we're very fortunate we've got Kelly's down there. So hopefully we'll see some usage down there in a safe and responsible manner, and we'll have what we can of a very good summer hopefully in town. So moving along then, so that report was just provided for information purposes. 6.2 is staff report 42-2020, changes to council composition. That's also provided for information, but there could of course be some action or motions that arise from this. So with that, I'll turn it over to our clerk, Ms. Castleman, who is presenting this report this evening and has a fair bit of detail there on what some of the options are. Kimberly?
Almost forgot to unmute. Thank you, Mayor Todd, through you. Some of you will, most of you will probably recall that I brought basically a similar report, the same report, to council last June 2019. At the time, it was just for information to explain the process to make changes to council composition. Some of you had an interest in doing so. So that evening, I was directed to add it to the action item list and bring it forward again in a year, in spring 2020. We are here now, so I thought I'd put it on this agenda just to get it back in your minds again. If you wanted to discuss it tonight, there's no rush to move any motions yet. We still have time. The bylaw, just if you wanted to make changes to the council composition, a bylaw would need to be put in place sometime in 2021, at least a year prior to the general election. So if anyone has any questions, I'm available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Castleman. Good report with some good information there. Everyone's got that and has a chance to take a look at that. So I'll open it up for discussion, comments, questions. As Kimberly did say, we do have some times. We don't absolutely have to come to a final decision on this tonight. So we could bat around some ideas and then ask staff to bring this report back in the future, because we do have a little time yet before we have to make the final decision. So at any rate, open it up for comments, questions for Ms. Castleman this evening. Councilor Burton, please.
Thank you. Yes, I remember having this conversation, and I think it's something that we need to look at. It's going to be saving the municipality some money in the long run. I also brought to the attention that I think we should look at a mayor and deputy mayor and 3 councillors. for the compliment. So it's something that we can consider down the road. So thank you for your report at this time and refreshing our memories. And I think it's something that we need to steer towards doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Other comments, questions on the report this evening? Councillor Shankar, please.
Thank you. So I guess one of the things I wouldn't mind seeing if there's any research out there, if there's been any changes to any other councils, I guess within Ontario, not necessarily just our size, but any councils that are currently going, or if they're looking into the same thing. I know that it's not an unusual ask that we have here. It's actually fairly common, and I think you know, when it was brought up a year ago, it was because the Minister Ford there, he decided that he was going to cut Toronto Council in half. So it's not something unusual. I think with the size of the town and the number of people that live in this town, we do have a fair number of councillors, and we could get away with just having 5. So again, we don't have to decide anytime soon. It's something to bring back, and I thank Kimberly for bringing it back and put it back on the agenda for us to have a decent conversation about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shankar. Kimberly, did you have a response?
Yeah, sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The most recent process in this area, in the Leeds and Grenville area, happened in 2013 with the city of Brockville. They reduced their council number to 9. I believe they did discuss it about a year ago too. A councillor or two wanted to go down to 7, but that didn't come to fruition. But the most recent one that I can recall was in 2013 with Brockville.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jansman, please.
Thank you for the report, Kim. I believe last time we spoke of it in June, I expressed concern of going down to 5. My opinion hasn't changed on that. I'm very much an advocate to make the council be as much of a representation of our residents as possible. And I think that that would hinder that to happen. So I just wanted that to be noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jansman. Kimberly, another comment?
Yeah, so there are pros and cons to keeping it as 7 or to reducing it. You'll save money, but then on the other hand, workload, right? Your council portfolios, committees, boards. So it's just things you have to weigh.
Thank you very much, Ms. Castleman. Other comments tonight? Councillor Ostrander.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wondering, another sort of sidebar to that is the role of the deputy mayor. If there was, I noticed GAN is 5 councillors, deputy, and a mayor, where North Grenville, Augusta, and Edwardsburg Cardinal are all 1, 1, and 3. I just wondered from perhaps Matthew could comment or yourself on the role of the deputy mayor, and if that's going to be of some assistance as far as away from the table type work, you know, the other 5 days of the week or 6 days of the week. Just wondered if you had any comments on that.
Ms. Castleman, do you have a comment on that first? I'll weigh in just a little bit on that if I could.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the Municipal Act is actually silent on the role of the deputy mayor. It does not mention a deputy mayor. You have to have 5 members of council, bare minimum, and a head of council. Typically, the deputy mayor is elected or appointed. It's the councillor that receives the most number of votes and then appointed by council by bylaw at the beginning of a term, or it's elected on the ballot. And the role, I think, it's to assist the mayor, to act in the absence of the mayor, to also act as a spokesperson for the town, like the mayor, attend ceremonial events in place of the mayor. So it would help with those mayoral duties as well. And at the lower tier level, you'll see some deputy mayors that also sit on county council and some other boards as well. Thank you.
And it is a point to make that we do have a deputy mayor. It's just not formal. The position is not formally elected. And, the only concern I would have with electing a deputy mayor or even appointing one for the full term is I think it's good to share those responsibilities around. I think Prescott, from what I can remember anyways, has always done it pretty much in this way where the position is shared around either alphabetically or so on and so forth through the term. So I think there's a benefit to that it doesn't load one person with that responsibilities, and it allows other people to share in it. So I of that with the deputy mayor position. And if you went down to 2 and 3, I have some concerns that Councillor Jansman mentioned. At one time, I was all for going for the 5. Now I'm not so sure, because I actually do appreciate more and more having the larger group, just as it does generate different discussions. You get different takes on issues, so that there is a part of me that does appreciate the 7. I'm actually surprised how many local municipalities still have the 7. I thought there was more of a move to move the numbers down a few years back, but you do see a lot that are still in the 7 across Leeds, Grenville, and into Lanark, SD, and G. 5 is quite common as well, of course, but I think 7 or 5 is either definitely has its strengths. So and in terms of the money saved, $22,000 a year. I mean, that's not to say that every taxpayer dollar doesn't count and isn't important, but it's not a huge savings, and perhaps we're losing some important representation with 2 other councillors there that could provide some real weight to the discussions and broaden our horizons when we're having discussions here, whomever's at the table. So I'm sort of 2 minds on that one. But other comments, questions, please. Okay, so we'll leave it off with that this evening. There's a lot there to digest with the numbers and so on. And thank Ms. Castleman for such a thorough report. It's got the comparables. The list is quite long here. That list is a good chunk of Eastern Ontario, if not damn near all of Eastern Ontario. So thank Kimberly for putting that together for us. So anyways, good food for thought there. We don't have to act on this until sometime in 2021. Correct, Ms. Castleman. So we're on the right path there with the information, and then we take it forward as at some point in the future. So with no more comments on that, we'll move on tonight. Thank everyone for the discussion, and obviously something we'll give some serious consideration to in the weeks ahead. So 6.3 is staff report 43-2020 broadband infrastructure resolution. Bless you. I did ask that to be brought forward based on a letter that was provided. Steve Clark put out last week, or I think late the week before, just on the broadband situation locally, to ask for support. We could put a resolution together and put our support behind this as well. There is some movement behind the scenes now to secure added federal funding for broadband infrastructure. This is fixed broadband. I will note that EORN, the Eastern Ontario Regional Network, the current project is cellular broadband. So we really are looking at 2 totally separate projects here. Fixed is, of course, direct wire to the home, could be fiber, could be coax, could be something else. But EORN is working on the cellular gap. So the recommendation, and take a deep breath and read this one for everybody watching at home. This is a big one, and I'll ask if we could have a mover and a seconder after this. So the recommendation reads, whereas the province of Ontario has worked together with local governments through the Broadband and Cellular Action Plan to support major investments in underserviced areas in Eastern and Southwestern Ontario, and have targeted $315 million over 5 years to expand broadband and cellular infrastructure. And whereas Ontario towns and cities are working together to respond to the COVID-19 outbreak, and there is now even more urgency to address gaps in service and high costs, and urgent investment from the federal government is required. And whereas in more northern and rural parts of Ontario, internet availability can be limited at best, gaps in coverage persist in southern and urban parts of the province, and for many in Ontario, the cost to access service are also prohibitively high. And whereas the lack of broadband access in rural Ontario puts everyone in unserved or underserviced areas at a disadvantage, students seeking help in homework while learning remotely, seniors and other vulnerable individuals looking to access critical services, and business owners working hard to keep afloat and compete during challenging times. And whereas broadband limitations also restrict the services that rural and northern municipalities can provide to their residents, Ontario's municipal leaders and the citizens they serve must be able to embrace digital service delivery now to respond to the pandemic and to deliver public services efficiently and equitably over the long term. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Council of the Town of Prescott supports the call by Minister Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, for the federal government to commit to the investment without delay in broadband and cellular infrastructure, and that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Honorable Navdeep Bains, Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, the Honorable Catherine McKenna, Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, the Honorable Miriam Bonsef, the Minister of Rural Economic Development and Minister for Women and Gender Equality, and MP Michael Barrett. And if we could also add, I believe, MP Laurie Scott to that list as well, MPP Laurie Scott to that list for infrastructure in Ontario. And that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Honorable Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and all municipalities located in Eastern Ontario. If I could have a mover on that. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Ostrander. Any discussion? Councillor McConnell?
I got just a couple questions, Brad, if I might. That has absolutely nothing to do with what Bell is doing in town now, correct?
No, that's installing, I believe that's part of the fiber to the home, is it not, Matthew? That's still ongoing now, or even nearing completion. They were doing us in Brockville roughly the same time. I think Brockville some construction's been going on there in the spring and summer as well.
Yes, that is fiber to the home.
Okay. The other thing is, I know originally the fire department was having trouble with their communication system in some buildings. Would this have any effect on that?
I don't believe so. This is targeted directly at essentially home internet access and fixed broadband access to the home. That's a good question about the fire communications. I haven't heard anything about that in a while, if that's a continuing issue, but that was a problem after the upgrade even a couple of years ago. Even worse when you get further north and get into hilly areas. In
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
It could assist out there. I'm really not sure if that would assist fire in those areas, because I mean it obviously is all sort of a part and parcel of the same problem with connectivity out there.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I will say that there is some movement going on now behind the scenes. EORN is working to lobby for this. The Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus did put a call out, and I believe they supported this by resolution a week or two ago as well. So they're involved, and I believe it's something that will be coming up with the Mayor's Caucus shortly as well. So I thought this would be a good thing to extend our support for this project and extend our support for what Minister Clark is trying to make happen here. And I will also put a shout out to Mayor Nancy Peckford in North Grenville, who's really put a lot of time and effort into this as well, advocating for both Leeds Grenville and of course North Grenville on that. So there's hopefully some good things happening behind the scenes on this. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thanks, everyone. And okay, moving on to 6.4, Staff Report 44-2020 and the Blue Box Program transition to full producer responsibility. Here's another long one. Recommendation is, whereas the amount of single-use plastics leaking into our lakes, rivers, and waterways is a growing area of public concern, and whereas reducing the waste we generate and reincorporating valuable resources from our waste stream into new goods can reduce greenhouse gas significantly, and whereas the transition to full producer responsibility for packaging, paper, and plastic and paper products is critical to reducing waste, improving recycling, and driving better economic and environmental outcomes. And whereas the move to a circular economy is a global movement, and that the transition of Blue Box programs would go a long way toward this outcome. And whereas the town of Prescott is supportive of a timely, seamless, and successful transition of Blue Box programs to full financial and operational responsibility by producers of packaging, paper, and paper products. I'm assuming that's paper and plastic products. Is that? Paper's there twice, but at any rate, whereas the Association of Municipalities of Ontario has requested municipal governments with Blue Box programs to provide an indication of the best date to transition our Blue Box program to full producer responsibility. Therefore, be it resolved that the town of Prescott would like to transition its Blue Box program to full producer responsibility on January 1, 2023. and that this decision is made based on the following rationale. The rapidly changing provincial, national, and international recycling industry is resulting in significant difficulties for municipalities to administer blue box programs. 2, residents are frustrated as the municipality implements changes to the blue box program to respond to the changes in the industry. 3, the changes are reducing the amount of acceptable recyclable materials as there are no longer viable markets for them to be used in. And 4, the cost of these changes is increasing the expenses of the municipal blue box programs while the amount of materials being collected and recycled are decreasing. And further, that any questions regarding this resolution can be directed to Matthew Armstrong, CAO Treasurer at 613-925-2812 or marmstrong@prescott.ca. And further, that the resolution be forwarded to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, and the Ontario Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. Do I have a mover for that extremely lengthy motion? Councillor Jansman, please. Seconder? Councillor Young, I think you just beat Councillor Burton. So with the preamble done and we know what we're talking about, Mr. Armstrong, would you like to take us away?
Certainly. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So just to confirm, it is paper and paper products as 2 separate items. And so just want to make sure that was in the case. So several years ago, there was a decision by the provincial government to move to a fully funded process for that producers of packaging and recycled items would be responsible for the overall administration, as well as both from a financial perspective, as well as a collection and reusing perspective for recyclables. And so in the meantime, there's lots of things that have changed. Obviously, Asian countries, and more specifically China, no longer accepts many of the recyclables. And that has caused a decrease in the ability to actually drop them off at depots because they have no place to sell them to. So I think we've all heard concerns and frustrations over recycling and the changes that have occurred over the last several years. And so what we're suggesting here is there's an option to put forth whether you'd like to move earlier in the process or later in the process. And I'm going to suggest that we move as part of the first phase. That being said, this doesn't guarantee us being able to move to that fully producer responsibility, but it does indicate that our willingness to be part of the early adopters. At the same time, there's the question over whether the municipality would want to continue with the collection process as part of the full producer responsibility. And my suggestion is not to, simply because if we're going to continue administering that and the oversight of that procedure and the collection process, then we're also responsible for making sure that we meet all of the contamination guidelines and strict limits. So if something is collected and it contaminates in a load to a point where it's no longer acceptable, then that's on the municipality to fix. And so I would suggest that we don't want to go down that path, given the number of changes that have happened and will be happening over the next several years as this gets rolled out. And so those are my 2 recommendations. AMO, Ontario Municipality Organization, excuse me, has requested that we provide this by the end of June. And so that's really why it's coming forward this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. So with that, I'll open it up for comments, questions this evening. Councillor McConnell, please.
I'm curious, Matthew, excuse me, when you say producers of things. So for example, a plastic container, is the producer of that plastic container responsible for its recycling, or is the retailer of whatever was in that plastic container responsible for its recycling? Or would be, I guess.
Mr. Armstrong, please.
Great question. So my understanding of how Stewardship Ontario and the Ontario government wants to set this up is that they're going to require the producers. So those that actually decide, how I'm going to package the product and what materials I'm going to use, they will be responsible for this overall process. And that's where the buy-in comes in, that if they're responsible for having to find a home for it and use for it after the fact, then that will drive real change in how things are actually packaged. They have a very large formulas in determining which producers will be involved, and really it comes with volume in how that's assessed. And then for importers and things like that, I believe they have a separate way of including them. So it hasn't been fully divulged in terms of exactly how it's going to work. Sitting in on a webinar tomorrow afternoon to explain it a little bit further, but certainly the intention is to have the producer and those that are responsible for determining how to package those products be responsible for also recycling and that whole life cycle of the material.
Thanks very much, Matthew. Any follow-up, Councillor McConnell?
My concern there was if you go into many stores today that sell small goods, but you can walk down the aisle and it's made in China, made in China, made in China, made in China. You can pick up 10 items and probably 8 of them are made in China. They're all packaged in paper and plastic or whatever. And despite what we may pass in the town of Prescott and what the provincial government might want to see happen, I can't see how we would compel those producers in China to take back these plastic packaging. I don't know how you would compel that unless you refuse entry to Canada, unless it went back. And again, with free trade and all that type of thing, I don't know how that would work. So I think this is a real good idea, but I think there's a lot of fleshing out that needs to go there. And at the end of the day, I think a totally different system is what's going to have to happen. And it's going to be technology, and it's going to take all this stuff in one spot, regardless of who or where it comes from. And it's, I don't know, I hate to use the word burnt, dissolved plasma, some kind of a thing, which separates it into individual elements, which are then directed somewhere. But I think this is kind of a stopgap measure right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, an excellent point. And it goes back to that incineration technology that remember way back when they were looking at that for Ottawa 10 plus years or so ago. And I think the marketability of something like that's got to be higher now. So I would expect there's something there. And I can't speak for the government on this, but they've been working on this for quite some time. I believe this actually goes back. It may go back to the last government that moves were made in this. Matthew's nodding his head. So this has been in the works for a few years now. And I would guess that a lot of it's going to be aimed at the food waste, which is a lot of that is, I believe, packaged right here in Canada, because it is some of it's even fresh food. So I think there's going to be some transition away from some of that, because as we've seen, we've all gone from, remember, we used to have the cardboard packaging for pretty much everything like that. Now it's all that black plastic. And that, of course, has been one of the biggest issues we've had with residents that have been accustomed to dumping those in their bins. And we don't take that sort of material anymore, because quite frankly, the Far East doesn't take it anymore because it has been contaminated. So at any rate, excellent question. So who else? I thought I saw another hand up there a moment ago. Councillor Jansman, please.
Thank you, Matthew, for your report. I think it's kind of, we're in a tough position, because for all of those unknowns that we don't know about, and I believe the movement has the best interest of the environment as its priority. But for us, maybe and I agree with Matthew, we don't want to be the collector of rejected material. So the end user, which our residents, will not like us not to recycle, right? So it's going to appear to perhaps to somebody who doesn't understand what is trying to be achieved, that they're no longer getting a service. Do you understand? I think, am I understanding that right? Matthew?
It's actually an excellent point in the messaging, because some people could look at this and think we're going to stop blue box recycling completely, but in reality, we're just trying to be part of the transition to what the blue box
Exactly.
program looks
Exactly.
like after the
Much better
province. Yeah. Oh no, you said it very well. It's just, but it is a good messaging question. Mr. Armstrong, did you have any comment on that?
Sure.
Concern?
So hopefully just a couple points for clarification and helping to understand it better. So this isn't a choice of whether we would continue doing blue box or not. It will continue to happen. If it happens today, it will continue to happen under the new provincial program. Really, the question is do we want to be considered as an early adopter and early in the program, or would we rather wait till 2025? And so my initial thought was sooner the better. And so that way we can be part of the helping and support of getting as much recycled as possible. And absolutely, we will continue having a viable and an energetic blue box program here in the town of Prescott. It was just administered by the producers or whatever consortium will be responsible for overseeing that. The second part is whether we would want to oversee the collection process. And we do oversee that today. And with the number of changes that will be happening as we move to the full packager responsibility, then I think it would be better to remove us from that communication cycle, so that we can link the town residents with those that are able to make the best changes and to really hear their feedback about the program as things move forward. So those were kind of just two of the items that I want to address. And absolutely, I think it's important to know and understand that we fully support recycling in the blue box program and want to continue that here in the town of Prescott. We just would also like to be able to help support residents and this process as part of the early on, so that we're not continuing to wait another 5 years until we're able to address it.
Follow up, Councillor Jasmine?
Just a thank you. That did clarify things for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Further comments, questions? Okay, I would just want to thank Mr. Armstrong for the report. And if you note in the one of the attachments, you do see a schedule there with how AMO is working with the province, and there's definitely a voice there for municipalities. So it's great that we're being proactive here and trying to be part of the solution and moving forward into the that transition phase with the blue box program, getting beyond where we are right now. Quite frankly, we all know we've taken some lumps locally with regards to we're not picking up anymore, and so on and so forth. And obviously that's a separate question, but that is being addressed as well. And there will be more to come from staff on that in the coming weeks. So we are listening to residents. We are doing what we can to improve that service and address the comments and concerns that we've been hearing. But this, as everything, it's takes a little time. Municipal government, the wheels sometimes grind a little slowly, but we are on that, and we're doing what we can to address that, in addition to working with AMO and the province to getting past the current situation, so we don't see those wasteful single-use products like food packaging going straight into landfills. Now, it's not something any of us are happy about, and we're doing what we can to work with the province to ensure that we move past that. Councillor McConnell?
Just, can I show you something here? I was doing some work in my backyard in May, and I dug up something, and I hope it shows up on the screen here. Can you see that?
Yep.
It's plastic packaging, and on the back of it, you can read, well, you probably can't read, but I can read it very well. That was in the ground for 27 years in my backyard. And if that goes to a landfill facility, that's what happens to it. It doesn't decompose. You can read that like it was yesterday. dumping this stuff in landfill is just no longer acceptable. We have to find another way. So the more that we can do now to push producers to work towards a solution here, I think that we should do as much as we can.
Excellent point. Yeah, that stuff, it does sit in the ground forever, some of those plastics. So excellent point, and excellent show and tell too. It does really kind of hammer home the point. Any further discussion before I call the question? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? Motion carried. And thanks again to Mr. Armstrong for that report. And we do await, there will be some follow-up to this and address some other issues with regards to garbage and recycling in the town as we move into the summer. So our next item this evening is 6.5. It's staff report 45-2020, and that's on a mobile vendor request to set up on town property. Mr. Merriman has a report on that. It's being brought forward for discussion. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sean and ask him to take us through his report tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is in relation to the licensing, the consolidated licensing bylaw, which is 02-95. And some background on it. In the past, Prescott has had a hot dog stand vendor, and he often set up in either the Marina or in the Clock Tower parking lot. However, currently all the mobile food vendors like chip trucks and stuff like that, whether they're motorized or unmotorized, are set up on private lands with the permission of the landowners, and most of them are actually paying the landowners a little bit of rent. Each one's negotiated separately. But there is some benefit to the private landowners. Last month, a request was submitted to allow for a vendor to operate in the Marina area or to be considered for any other possible locations in the downtown area, but he wanted them on town property regardless of where it was. One of the conditions of our bylaw is having the permission of the landowner, which in this case is the town, and the approval of the building and bylaw manager along with health unit and fire department. Staff have some serious concerns regarding the approving of this vendor for the summer of 2020. This includes the fact that already most of the reasons why you would probably want someone like that, like the St. Lawrence Shakespeare Festival, the Farmers Market, and many other events have already been either completely canceled or seriously scaled back. In addition, many physical restaurants have suffered with either complete loss of sales or vastly reduced sales and are offering takeout only, as patio dining is just starting to return. Sorry, got to move to the next page. So some of the things that we could consider with this is whether or not just to deny this application outright on town-owned lands, or to implement a policy to not allow vendors in general on town-owned lands for the foreseeable future, and request that all vendors operate on private lands. So in other words, they reach out to the private landowners in the downtown area to make some sort of agreement if they wish to set up. Some of the other things that we could do, come up with some sort of rental formula or higher permit fees for anyone that wanted to be on town property. Or we could simply still approve it the way it is. The bylaw says it could be approved, but it needs to be done so with town council's blessing. The financial implications to the town are really very minimal at this point. We're talking, basically one vendor permit fee that we would not be collecting, which would be, I believe it's $250 for the year. So, and that is my report, Mayor Todd. If I could get some feedback from council, how they think we should proceed, either now or even into the future, it'd be appreciated. And then we can bring it back in a proper report reflecting the direction given.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Mr. Merriman. Just one quick comment though, before I open it up. Is there anything on food trucks and mobile food services with regards to the reopening in the province? Is that being treated just essentially as patios and so forth? So it's allowed to go forward with the usual restrictions and so on?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, basically, they've never really shut down. They've been considered a takeout business the entire time. Now, if some of them want to have picnic tables and stuff, again, that's being treated more like the patio stuff, but the actual selling of the food has been allowed through the entire time.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Sean. I kind of figured that, but I just wasn't sure because I didn't see anything mentioned ever with regard to those operations. So open it up for discussion with members of council this evening. Number of options there and ideas to deliberate. So have at it. Or not. McConnell.
Well, I'd say the restaurants that we have right now are having a rough enough time without any competition from a food truck that we're going to make $250 off of. So I would say this year we just don't allow it on town property. If they rent someplace on a private lot, we have no control over that. But I would be in favor of supporting our local businesses that are already here, already established, already paying taxes for this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McConnell. Councillor Burton, please.
Thank you. I want to echo what Councillor McConnell was saying. I think our businesses downtown and uptown are struggling already. But in the same fact, I don't want to discourage any small business as a hot dog vendor for not opening up. So if it's feasible for that vendor to go on a private owned land, that would be a great idea. But I'd like to be able to help support our local restaurants and eateries in town. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Further comments? Now there's two voices then for option A. Anyone else have any opinion on this? Councillor Young, please.
I agree with the other two councillors, but I think we should make it clear this is not about this vendor. This is about any vendors. I think we should make that clear.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Councillor Ostrander, please.
I'd have to go along as well. Our main food eateries downtown are just opening along with their patios. So I think we have to go with them. They've lost a good portion of the season already. And I just, with Shakespeare gone and various other things, I think we can say no to this quite handily.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ostrander. Well, I've got two that still haven't spoken. So Councillor Shankar, and then we'll go to Councillor Jansman to wrap up. Gory, please.
I find this a difficult scenario only because I don't know how much a hot dog vendor will take away from a business that, you know, Boomers, is it open? Are they going to open? You know, anyway, but are we making this rule for all mobile vendors, whatever they may be? Or is it just like a food vendor? And are we doing it because we're trying to support our local businesses? You know, I just want to make sure why are we doing what we're doing? Sean?
Yeah, Sean, I'm just kind of focusing on everyone's mentioned essentially option A, denying it for this year only to support downtown businesses in a rough time and not provide another option for people to eat downtown, so they have to go to the restaurants or would be directed more to the restaurants. So Sean, is that essentially, I think Gory had it on.
No problem. Through you, Mr. Mayor. This really has to do with mostly all it's all mobile. The first thing to stress is mobile, and in general, mobile vendors tend to be food vendors. And like I say, the concern that staff had is just the fact that already the brick and mortar restaurants often have a bad feeling about these types of vendors to begin with. to allow them to set up on town property at this time just seemed a little bit insensitive during this thing. It's not so much that one hot dog vendor is going to take all that much away from one more restaurant, but at the same point, every one of these restaurants may be looking at the case where they need every sale that they could possibly get. And like I say, these people come in and they're not all nice people. I'm not saying they're not, but we as staff thought that it would be more appropriate for them to basically find their way through the private side of things versus through the municipal side of things, in which there isn't a whole lot of revenue for the municipality to begin with. Does that make more sense, Corey?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, in this, without Shakespeare, there might not be much of a need for a hot dog vendor down by the water, but yeah, I get it.
You're gonna hot dogs.
Hey?
I said, you're gonna miss those hot dogs.
Not exactly.
Councillor Jasmine, you want to wade in? And
I certainly appreciate the staff's motive in this report, and I kind of find it tough too. Can I just ask one question? Do we foresee the farmers market opening up at all of this year? Not a fair question, but probably not, eh? I would hate to look like a little bit of a contradiction, right? Because they're mobile food vendors there too, right? Selling vegetables or plants or butter tarts or what have you.
And we've had people selling hot, like prepared food and things there as well.
That's right.
In the not too distant past. So Mr. Armstrong or Mr. Merriman, any comment on that question?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of the farmers market, under the current guidelines and restrictions, they would not foresee opening at this time. That doesn't mean that as things loosen up, they might change their mind. I think the core of this one is, do we want to provide town-owned property for what could be seen as a prime location? So close to the marina, right along the rock walkway, things like that, versus at this time, given all of the economic stressors on our other town or the other restaurants in the town of Prescott, then is this just not a good year to entertain that? So I don't think it's a hard and fast rule that will apply always going forward. And certainly we do provide the farmers market as an alternative for those businesses that want to set up on town property under the established bylaw. But certainly I think those are the extenuating circumstances to this particular situation kind of warranted the discussion.
Thank you. I too get it. That it's not the business we need to be in, especially this year. I get it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jasmine. Any further comments on this? So what I'll probably suggest is a motion based on option A. Ms. Castleman, is that what you were? But I just want to make a comment on this myself, and I'm actually glad both Councillor Shankar and Jasmine raised this, because I've just been thinking about this, and as much as it seems like a no-brainer in a lot of ways to support downtown business and our downtown restaurants. I mean, the reality of it is it's a hot dog cart. Nobody else offers that sort of service downtown. So it's really such an entirely different offering of food. And I mean, not too many people who grab a quick hot dog from their boat in the marina, or as they're walking down along the pathway down there. That's more of a spur of the moment type purchase. It's quick street eats. And at least, Sean, you're going to tell me it's not just hot dogs, and it's.
Well, what I was going to tell you is, because I didn't want to get into specifics of there was someone that was planning on offering quite a varied menu options if we were willing to consider it.
Okay. I still think that like street food is a very different, and that's a horrible term for it, street food, but anything like that with food trucks and so on, it's a totally different approach by and large to to what you get in restaurants, even takeout. I'm not going to oppose this because I definitely see the rationale for it, but I do think it's in many ways kind of an apples and oranges argument. But this is a very strange year, and anything we can do to help our downtown restaurants is, I'm sure, will be very well received. So Kimberly, do you have a suggestion for a motion there based on option A?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the suggested motion reads that council deny mobile food vendor applications on town-owned land for the year 2020 and encourage these vendors to find privately owned locations.
Thank you very much. If I could have a mover then. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by everybody, but I think Ray had his hand up first. So moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Hung. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And thanks for bringing that forward, Sean. It is it's an interesting situation for this year. So I'm glad that did come forward to council. So moving on to 6.6, the staff report 46-2020 on repaving projects for the year. This recommendation is just being brought forward for information. So Mr. Armstrong, would you care to take us through some of these repaving projects you're bringing forward this evening?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So each year we use our Ontario Community Infrastructure Funding, or OCIF funding, for doing repaving projects throughout the town. This year, the funding is $267,000. And so what we want to do is provide an opportunity to inform council exactly what that looks like, as well as the results of the street survey that we did last fall. So if you remember, we contracted with Street Logics to conduct a pavement condition index assessment, and they used not only sensors, car-mounted sensors, but a 360-degree camera to identify all of the defects, whether it's cracking, potholes, just portions of the pavement that might be breaking up, and be able to identify and assess what they call a pavement condition index score. And so the higher the number, the better the condition of the pavement. And when you take a look at the map provided in the report this evening, you can see that there's actually a lot of green areas in town, which means it's good or very good. Yellow is fair, and so it's starting to see some age issues with it. And then orange is poor, and then red is poor, very poor. And so when you take a look at that, certainly I was personally pleasantly surprised that we didn't have as much red as I had feared. And when you take a drive through many of those streets, you'll find that the condition rating for the most part makes sense. That I think everyone can agree that East Street between King and James is not in good condition, and certainly one that we should be taking a look at. The area down by the medical center, running along the back of Walker House, as well as by the tennis courts, and coming up from the water treatment plant, aren't great areas, as well as portions of Dibble Street East. So when we're taking a look at prioritizing on a yearly basis, we take a look at what we see from an infrastructure perspective and what we're going to need to change in the next 5 years. And at this point, we have a portion of Dibble Street East assigned for next year, a fairly significant portion of it to be replaced, followed by the rest of it 2 years later, and then finally East Street between King and James. So we wouldn't suggest spending a great deal of our repaving budget in those areas. We'll continue to patch the holes, make it safe for travel, but not repave the areas if we're going to rip it up within the next 5 years. So that was kind of the basis for that thinking. So then we started taking a look at the other areas, and certainly the portion behind Walker House came up several times in the course of our strategic planning discussions, as well as infrastructure discussions and capital planning. And so we were encouraged by the fact that, yes, it is in poor condition. It is similar to some of the other red areas. And so given the fact that we're putting the splash pad in and we expect higher travel in that area in 2021, then it seemed to make sense to do it this year. Another portion that we saw as being important to do this year is the section of Henry Street West from Sophia to the town boundary. That showed a lot of degradation, and when the frost was coming out of the ground, it became almost impassable without going at a very slow rate of speed. And so we saw that as being kind of the two projects where we would invest approximately half the budget into repaving those. There's approximately 31 other areas that are around manholes, valves, things like that, that we want to make sure that is properly repaved and repaired, because that's not only how you continue damaging the pavement, but then you can have some effects on the infrastructure. And certainly we don't want to be damaging those higher dollar items in terms of the infrastructure that would have knock-on effects. And then we also took a look at some other areas. The intersection of Edward and Churchill seemed like an area that does need some help and support. Is a high volume intersection, and so sees a lot of traffic. A large portion of Hyde Street between Ann and St. Lawrence we identified as needing to be repaved, and that was identified in red on the report. The intersection at Boundary Road and James Street East. So what we tried to do was maximize the resurfacing budget, get it to go as far as we could, and then being able to address some of those high need areas. So basically we're able to address 3 of the items, and there's probably only 8 or 9 items on our streets that need repaving when you take East Street and Dill Street West out. So our goal is to try and do 2 or 3 a year of the red areas, and then be able to continue. And then 3 years from now, we'll go through this process again, and then again start focusing on our red areas. And so it's been very helpful in terms of how we prioritize, and it's much better than kind of just driving around and thinking, well, A, B, and C need to be done, but to actually have a scientific way of determining the pavement condition index, as well as being able to support that in terms of our medium and longer term planning, then that's certainly very helpful. To just give you an indication, there's approximately 32 kilometers of roads in Prescott. That there's 2 ways to look at roads. One is to look at the whole road and say that there's 32 kilometers of it. The other way is to actually count lane kilometers. And so every kilometer of street, if it's a 2-way street, then it's actually 2 kilometers of lane kilometers. When you're dealing with portions of Edward Street, especially north, then those sections that has 4 lanes would actually be 4 lane kilometers if it went for a kilometer. So we're just dealing with the 32 kilometers in total of roads, and we're happy to say that 77% are fair or better in the town of Prescott. The 7.5 kilometers that are poor or very poor is what we're trying to address in what we're suggesting this year, as well as a good portion of that will be reduced by doing Dill Street East and East Street over the next few years. So certainly just wanted to provide this for report and for information, and more than happy to answer any questions as they arise. Oh, and one other portion that I did want to highlight is that it says Mary Street and Water Street from King Street to St. Lawrence, and it should read to Sophia, just for a clarification point. Seems like I was getting tired at that point when I was writing the report.
Another small point, it is Boundary Street as well, not Boundary Road.
So that's an interesting one. We did check a couple of Google Earth and whatnot.
It is,
and we do have to correct those on those if it is street. So that was an interesting one for us.
Yeah, as far as I know, it's always been Boundary Street, but that's an interesting point. What the official name may be way back when. So anyhow, thanks very much for the report, Matthew. Open it up for comments, questions, discussion. Members of council. Really? No comments? Okay. Councilor Mercado, please.
A number of years ago, at least the last time that King Street was resurfaced, I remember when it was done, they the council today contracted it to, I don't know who, and what they did was pave the whole thing all the way through, straight through, but they didn't pave from the edges of where the asphalt machine went to the crosswalks, to the stone crosswalks that we have. So consequently, on the north side and the south side of some of our north-south streets, what you have between the paving stone crosswalk and the actual driving surface of King Street, you have about, I don't know, 3-4 feet that is just awful. They subcontracted that to a different contractor who come back later, must have used a different type of asphalt, different rollers, I don't know what, but it hasn't stood up for the dam. And there are a number of streets that are just awful. The streets themselves are good. King Street is good, but that 2 feet where you cross there is awful. I don't know whether that can be captured by this type of a program or not, because they'd be looking at one street and the other street. Can we do anything? Is there anything in our budget that we can look at these streets? You'd have to look at each one individually, because they're just awful.
That's a great comment, Councilor McConnell. And it's something I raised with Matthew on a few occasions. I think we just talked about it again last week, particularly that section at Churchill, King and Edward as you're going north. That's one of the worst spots there. And I believe Matthew said that is being looked at now for some sort of remediation in the near future. Matt, am I correct on that?
Could you identify where you just mentioned? Did you say King and Churchill?
Yeah, King and Edward, sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The area by Bobby's, it's exactly what Lee's talking about, that little separation.
So very much so. We have, in particular, Edward and King Street, some concerns as to how that is faring and how we can bring that up. So I see exactly what you're saying now in terms of that 2-foot strip, and we will take a look at that to see what we can do. We do have a lot of priorities for this year, and so while it might not be this year, then certainly we'll see if we can get it into next year's budget, if you're okay with that.
Even if there's a way to fill some of the spots where it's really come away, because some have actually turned into sort of potholes. It's for the exact reason Lee mentioned, and some of them could definitely use maybe a little fill or some stopgap to help right now. That one section is the one I just always notice because it's significant little chunk out of the pavement there.
Yeah, so just as a point of clarification, we will be addressing King and Edward this year, but the other ones I'd like to be able to do a little bit more investigating on.
Okay, thank you. Follow up, Councilor McConnell?
Well, I was thinking more west of King and Edward, because I walk south on Ann Street, south on west, and well, of course, we've already done St. Lawrence and Center. And it's bad enough if you're driving over it, but it's dangerous on a bicycle. Anybody that's in a wheelchair or one of those little electric carts, anything like that, they really should be looked after, because it's only 2 feet, 3 feet, but it's wherever you get off King Street, wherever you get on King Street. So it's bad. It's bad right there.
Okay, we'll certainly take a look at that and see what we can do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor McConnell. Thanks, Matthew. Other comments on the report this evening? Councilor Jasmine.
I just wanted to echo Matthew's comments that I too was quite pleasantly surprised that over 77% is in fair or better condition. Yeah, I know he mentioned it, and I was, like I said, quite surprised too. Just wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other comments? Councilor Shankar, and then Councilor Burton, please.
Just a quick comment. We paid for this survey to be done, and do we get it done again in a couple of years? How often does it get done for us?
Mr. Armstrong, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this was completed in the fall of 2019. we have access to the program for the next 3 years. And as we repair each section, we can actually go in there and update the information, and it will readjust the lines and whatnot. So we're very happy about that. Then the intention is 3 years from now, we would do this process again, and it would actually show us kind of that time lapse of where it did in 2019 and what it looks like in 2022. So yeah, it's been quite helpful to be able to identify where our stress points are, but then also in the program, and I'd like to be able to give council, and maybe it's more of a one-on-one or in small groups, but exactly what information is in the program, because there's a lot of great information. You're able to kind of click on all of the areas, see exactly what the camera saw in terms of potholes, cracks, things like that. And that way you're able to say, okay, yeah, that aligns with that. That's how it determined that pavement index and things like that. So really we want to kind of do a great education with council. It's not possible in this venue, unfortunately, but certainly I think it will help answer a lot of questions. We can also update it as to say, you know, now we see this as a problem area, so certainly take a look at that in our next survey and things like that. We're able to put in the exact cost of repairs, and so it's able to say, if you were to repair everything this year, and here's the impact, it would cost $2.3 million or whatever it may cost. So it really provides a nice bit of information and tools that we haven't had available to us before. And all of our previous surveys were done with basically an engineer looking out the front window of their car and making notes. And so this is a much more scientific way of doing it, and certainly provides us with a point in time where we can take a look at it and say, how are things progressing or not, and then being able to update the information in the program itself.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. I mean, what I like about it is that it's giving us an objective view. It's not a subjective view depending on, like you said, the engineer looking out his car window. And if we're going to use the same company again in 3 years, we should see, you know, an improvement to this map going forward.
And yeah, it also gives us an opportunity to see those that are in poor might be continuing on to very poor and things like that. So that way you can start to say, once I've got most of my reds done, now can I start focusing on some of my oranges, and then being able to address to perhaps extend the longevity of some of those yellow areas by doing crack filling, by doing smaller areas, so that way it alleviates some of those overall having to repave the entire section. So right now we're kind of dealing with catching us up a little bit, and then as we move forward, we want to move more towards preventative maintenance.
Thanks very much, Mr. Armstrong. Anything further, Gort?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Burton, did I see your hand up after Councillor Shankar? Please.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Armstrong, are we concentrating on streets that are flooded with water most times in certain areas that is a hazard by sidewalks and children walking on sidewalks to school? And there is a problem area on Boundary Street right across the street from Wellington School. It seems to be an ongoing potholes in that section 4 or 5. I think they were covered up a couple different times, but I noticed that they need to be redone again. So, but I'd like to hear a comment about water sitting on the streets and what are we doing to rectify that problem?
Certainly. So part of what we do on an observational basis, on a regular basis, is both our water department as well as our operations department take note of those areas where there might be standing water. And if we're able to kind of shape that area, then we make every attempt to do so. So a prime example is Councillor McConnell brought up, I believe, the part of Hyde Street that's right off of Sophia. And it's up in kind of that northwest quadrant just before you get to the train tracks. And so lot of standing water there, and so we have come up with a solution that that I'd like to bring forward to our next council meeting to alleviate that type of issue. And so a lot of damage to the sidewalk, lot of damage to laneways and an unsafe condition. So it's those types of when we identify those, we take every opportunity to see how we can process that. In terms of some of those other areas, sometimes it's a matter of making sure that the catch basin is clear, that the gullies that run along the side of the road are acting as they should. And so we make those. And then other times it's, and we've done that in a couple of areas over the last several years, is just paving perhaps the 2 or 3 feet from the sidewalk and re-sloping that so that the water doesn't sit there. But any observations, and I wrote down the one boundary across from Wellington's, we'll certainly take a look at and see what the appropriate treatment would be.
Follow up if I may.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So the street I'm talking about is actually Woodland, and it's right in front of my house, and it's been sitting there since the school was built. And it is a big safety hazard. The water sits in front of my house on the street. In the wintertime, it ices over. So the children walking to school, that is a safety issue. Cars, don't necessarily know that it's frozen over. And quite often, the bus is coming by and the water is actually 3/4 the way across the street, 80% of the time. So, these are the kind of situations that we don't want to get into with a municipality, with a safety issue. So I'm just wondering if we could address if there's any other issues in town like that, but it's definitely a safety issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Mr. Armstrong, any comment on this section of Woodland by Councillor Burton's place?
Yeah, certainly the next time it rains, we'll go out and we'll take a look, see what the possible, see what the possible solutions are, and then see how we can address it. But absolutely, if there's ever a concern like that, then just let me know, and we'll certainly see how we can possibly rearrange that to be able to just make sure that it's moving along. And sometimes it's just a matter of making sure that the grading and the slope of the road is working in the right way. And sometimes that's an easy fix. Sometimes it's a more substantial one. But certainly standing water is not something that we want to have on any of our streets. And just because it becomes more of a safety issue.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Burton?
No, I appreciate that. It's been there. I know the catch basins are not even near it, and since the school was built, the slope does not go towards the catch basin; it goes towards the sidewalk. So the water sits there 90% of the time. So it's something that it's been an issue, and unfortunately, it's in front of my house. But I'm more concerned about the children when they walk to school in the summer and the winter, especially when it freezes over. So thank you for addressing that.
Thank you very much. Further comments, questions on this report this evening? Just along the same lines, I do note about the standing water issue since it's been raised now. I know that's been a problem in the square at different times. And I see that as been identified. That's a red zone on the map. So that will be addressed. But the other one though was faders, and that section in the northwest quadrant, which I had a resident refer to me a number of times on some water and drainage issues there. And that's something that maybe we could talk offline about that one and see. I don't believe we've done any remediation efforts on that. I think it's more of a long-standing issue, but that's something that we might want to talk about as well, because that goes back a number of years with similar concerns with regards to drainage and that portion of faders.
Certainly.
Okay, so with nothing further, then we will move along to We have another item under section 6, and that's 6.7. It's our 2020 summer meeting schedule discussion. Kind of nice we're at the summer meeting schedule discussion, although boy, the last few months have sort of soared by here. So the current meeting schedule is listed here with the 2 meetings July, 2 meetings in August. I'll turn it over to Mr. Armstrong, who has some comments about that as well, and we'll see what the group's decision is on our meeting schedule for the summer.
Certainly, thank you very much. So we've been currently working at doing it first and third week of each month, and so the June is a unique month where there's 5 Mondays, and so we need to address whether that would occur. And then if we keep to that first and third, it would end up going back to back in 2 and 3 weeks time. So if we take a look at kind of how the summer schedule, I think we were looking at the 2nd and 4th weeks. But if we were to move to just the first week, which I would be more than happy to endorse, just because it has been 3 months of there's a lot been going on, and certainly we could take advantage of taking a slight pause. But that being said, there's still a lot going on, and being able to call a meeting whenever required is essentially important. So we just kind of wanted to work out how we wanted to do the next couple of months of meetings, and then at that point just have a clear understanding of how you'd like to be kept up to date on things, and things that you want to cover over the next 2 months. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. So I guess like what you were sort of suggesting there was July, which would be the 6th, we would move it up to, and then the next meeting would be after the civic holiday in August, which would be either you could go to the 10th or you could go to Tuesday the 4th. So I think that's sort of is that correct? That's pretty much so is everyone okay with that as a meeting schedule for the summer? I wouldn't be shocked if we have to call an extra meeting there if something comes up, but we will also, the July meeting should give us some good clarity on what the situation is with the splash pad, and what the recommendation is there in the decision coming forward through the emergency control group. So I don't think we're going to miss anything there. And as Matthew said, it's been a kind of a long haul for staff and everyone concerned these past few months. So a little bit of a step back, although we can obviously call the meeting at any time, wouldn't be a bad idea for July and August. So open it up for discussion. Those are basically the options. Councilor Burton, please.
Thank you. I'm in total agreement. If staff is basically asking for a break, and like you said, Mayor Todd, we can, you can call a meeting at any particular time if we need to meet sooner than the suggested July 6th and August 4th dates. So I'm in favor of that.
Thanks very much, Councilor Burton. Any other discussion, or would everyone be okay if I ask Councilor Burton to put forward a motion setting the schedule for the July and the August dates as mentioned? See, Councilor McConnell, you had your hand up for a comment.
Just a question, Your Worship. Are we still looking at doing these video meetings for July and August?
Yeah, I did talk to Matt about that briefly this afternoon, and that is the recommended course of action. We would be pushing the limits, get everybody in the same room with staff. We're pushing the limits on that 10. We wouldn't really be able to allow any public presence in the gallery. So I think we probably have to wait till the next phase as the province moves forward and ups that limit. But I think we're getting close. But I think right now probably the safe way is to schedule a couple more Zoom meetings and then reevaluate in August, and hopefully get back together in September. Is that a fair assessment of that, Matt?
Yes, and so if I go back to the bylaw that was passed for allowing for electronic meetings, then as long as the province or the municipality is in a state of emergency, then we can meet in this format. As soon as there is no further emergency, then it's in person. The thing that we have to remember is even if we can get 10 people together, we still have to have 6 feet apart. And so that is going to be a little bit more difficult in council chambers, just being able to do that. But certainly we want to return to council chambers when it's safe to do so, because I think it's more efficient to run the meeting from that perspective. And I think you can have better conversation and that sort of thing. So certainly understand what that can mean and look like, but just want to make sure that we're able to do it when we get there.
Thanks very much, Mr. Armstrong. Anything further, Councillor McConnell?
No, I'm in agreement with that. That's fine.
Councillor Burton, are you okay with making that motion then?
Yes, I am. I'll make that motion.
Thank you. So the two dates would be July the 6th, Monday, July the 6th, and August. We did kind of add, but there's two options really: Tuesday the 4th, right after the Civic, or Monday the 10th. I would say, if I'm correct on that. I think I've got the right calendar up. So is that so? What the August date, I guess, is the only one, 4th or 10th? What do people prefer?
10th.
10th.
Okay. So, Councilor, you're okay with that? That is your motion then for July 6th and August 10th?
That is correct. I can make that motion.
Thank you very much. Could I ask for a seconder, please? Everyone, but I think Ray had his hand up first. So seconded by Councilor Young. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thanks very much. So moving along to item 7, notices of motion. There actually is a notice of motion this evening. It's from myself, and I'll just read it out. I'm just as a very quick preamble, because we don't discuss this this evening. It comes back to the next council meeting. Just presenting this tonight because of some concerns in the community about speed in town streets. So I thought I'd bring this forward. So the motion reads that council directs staff to implement a speed limit of 40 kilometers per hour for all motor vehicles within the town of Prescott, and that all plans and preparation with regards to signage, notice to residents, and all other necessary matters to enact this change be completed so that the new speed limit can come into effect on or before September 7th, 2020, in time for the start of the school year. So we will bring that forward at the next council meeting for full discussion and possible deliberation and action. I do have some information from the MTO on this change that I secured last week that I will ask our staff to share with other members of council with regards to the signage requirements and so forth. But with that, I am bringing this forward this evening for full discussion at our next meeting. And that takes us to Mayor's Proclamations under 8. And of course, we do have one tonight for recognizing Pride. And just before I start off, I do want to thank those that were able to make it today for the raising of the Pride flag down at the Marina. The Pride flag is also flying at Town Hall as well this year. So 2 locations. And of course, as people have seen on social media, the Pride crosswalk has been painted up beautifully by our town staff again. It's out there and it's a beautiful sight, I find, in the east end of Prescott, to show what kind of a welcoming, tolerant, open-minded community we are, where we support all of our citizens. So being that, with that said, and a special shout out today also, I should mention John Bowman and the good folks at O'Heafey's that provided a Pride cake today and some refreshments for right after, all done socially distancing on the patio, and the remainder of the cake was sent back to town staff. I believe it was shared with the Public Works guys and folks at Town Hall as well. So much appreciated, John Bowman and the staff at O'Heafey's, for their support there. So with that said, the proclamation for Pride Month, June 2020. Whereas there is a necessity to actively support lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, two-spirited, queer, and all their sexual orientation and gender identities to be celebrated and supported as full and equal members of our community. And whereas the town of Prescott recognizes that diversity is a vital and integral part of our community that is celebrated and strengthens our town, and we should take pride in our identities and never feel we must hide who we are at work, school, or within our families and communities. And whereas the intent of the Pride flag being raised at Town Hall and at the water fountain area by the Marina is to show support for the rainbow community and show the commitment of the town of Prescott to providing a safe and welcoming place that improves the overall quality of life for all members. We look forward to the town of Prescott and its community members as being and fulfilling their title as ambassadors and leaders while we strive for equality in Ontario, Canada, and even more broadly the world. So therefore, I, Mayor Brett Todd, do hereby proclaim the month of June 2020 as Pride Month in the town of Prescott, and I encourage all citizens to take pride in our diversity and to celebrate our differences to make our town a place we can all be proud to call home. And that is dated and signed, of course, this 15th day of June 2020 in the town of Prescott. I want to thank all those that have supported our celebration of Pride here in Prescott. It shows the great quality of our little town here. And I also want to particularly thank all members of council for being united on this since we brought this forward last year. It says a lot for our entire group, it says a lot for our town hall team as well, and our public works, all our staff, what we're doing here. And I think it's making a statement that is much appreciated in the community. And it's something that really tells people what our Fort Town is all about. So thanks again for all the support on that, and happy Pride to everyone who is celebrating now and for the rest of the month of June. And that gets us right to closed session tonight under 9. We do have one item under 9.1 on a purchase and sale matter. So the recommendation is that council move into closed session at 8:21. I'll actually say 8:30, so we'll take a very quick break. That we move into closed session at 8:30 to address matters pertaining to purchase and sale under section 238 2C of the Municipal Act 2001, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality, and that the CAO, treasurer, clerk, and deputy clerk remain in the electronic meeting. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councilor Ostrander, seconded by Councilor Jansman. So as I said, we'll pass this now and we'll come back at 8:30 for the closed session. All those in favor? Motion's carried. We'll be back at 8:30.